Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. I'm your host, Tony Anagor, and I am a negotiation skills specialist, and I work helping companies to do three things specifically. Number one is shift the way companies negotiate internally with internal stakeholders and teams to help them build bridges between the silos so that more teams can communicate and navigate more effectively. Secondly, is how to build long-term sustainable relationships with trust at the center. And thirdly is how to deal with conflict, whether they are unexpected conflicts or conflicts that have been obvious within the company for a while. We work on using emotional intelligence to build frameworks to be able to deal with these conflicts. And each week I sit down with guests from all over the world. Some of them are in business, some of them are in procurement, sales, leadership, academia, hostage negotiation, childhood development, psychology. They may not always be household names, but they are leaders and thinkers and practitioners doing the deep work, the meaningful work that helps us think and helps us shape the way we see things. Now, we don't always agree on our perspectives, but that's what makes this podcast so interesting for me, because this is a space for open and honest conversations, where we're not just talking about techniques and strategies, but we're talking about the human experience of negotiation. And my aim is to make negotiation much more of a democratic pursuit so that more and more people realize that we negotiate every single day and become better and better at negotiating with each other, building better conversations and building better outcomes. If there's somebody you would like me to speak to, drop me a line, drop me a message. I would love to hear from you. But also, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you can get more of these interviews straight into your inbox. And now, today, I'd like to introduce our next guest. Our next guest is Dr. Bruno Cignacco. Bruno Cignacco is an international business consultant. He's also a TEDx speaker and a researcher for over 30 years. And he specializes in dealing with the art of compassionate business. So we're going to have a deep dive today and talk about how compassion, what role compassion really plays in business. And in a world today where the pendulum seems to be swinging from one end to the other, it's quite timely that we talk about the role that compassion does have in business, if indeed it does have a role. So tune in to this conversation. I look forward to sharing some insights with Dr. Bruno Cignacco on Empathy at the Table. Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. I think we're in for a real treat today. I'd like to introduce you to our next guest, Bruno Cignacco, who is an international business consultant. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a researcher for over 30 years, and he's advised and trained hundreds of companies on international trade activities and international marketing. He also trains companies on topics related to compassionate business and human-orientated leadership. Wow, that's a real mouthful. I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation. Bruno, thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table.
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be here. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. Bruno, for our listeners who may not have heard of you, could you just share a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yes. I'm currently, for many years, I have been advising companies on international marketing, so import-export activities, international marketing strategy, international negotiation. And lately, over the last 5 years, we have been advising companies on a new area, a non-traditional area that is compassionate business, and how can companies become more human-oriented. This means caring for different stakeholders such as employee, customers, business partner, the community, the media, the competitors too, and also they can also become more profitable. So this means that being human-oriented is not incompatible with being profitable, being productive, being creative. On the contrary, when people are more human-oriented in business, they tend to get better results. There is a lot of research on this, and we can discuss this later. And what we train companies is on, for example, some topics such as how to develop a much more compassionate workplace, how to develop much more mindful communication, how to eliminate fear from the work environment, that is very important, and become more productive, how to bring about much more innovative business ideas, among other topics. These are non-traditional topics, but we keep on advising companies on international marketing too.
So I mean, straight out of the gate, you've come up with some words that are quite emotive. So you've used the word compassion, you've used the word fear, you've used the word emotions. These are all kind of words that typically you don't hear, or traditionally you don't hear them in the workplace. Tell me more about what is it that's motivated you to bring this kind of discussion into the center stage.
Very interesting question. Well, some years ago, I read an article titled "The Human Moment at Work," and this motivated me to research more on this topic. This article was about how can people develop, for example, a more meaningful conversation in the workplace by bringing about emotions, but connecting to others on a mental and emotional level. I'm not talking only about topics like business topics, but also talking about other topics that, for example, family, friends at work, and how this can bring about a better workplace. And this brought me to research on these topics for many years, and this was coronated by my latest book that is in its second edition, The Art of Compassionate Business, where I talk about what we call principles that bring about better performance, more productivity, more profitability, but stronger relationship in the workplace and in business in general. And these principles are very simple and include some principles such as compassion, generosity, gratitude, kindness, and forgiveness, among other principles that are very important. And why we don't hear so much about this? Because most companies are focused on what I call in my research quantitative aspect of business, what can be measured precisely, what can be quantified. For example, you can put some figures to this. For example, profit, productivity can be measured, market share can be measured, sales can be measured, and can be compared internally and annually. But there are other aspects that cannot be measured precisely that are what I call qualitative aspects of business. For example, compassion, kindness, care, support, camaraderie, commitment. And this aspect bring about stronger relationship in the workplace and with different stakeholders. When you foster this qualitative aspect of business, not only you can bring a stronger, more robust relationship with different stakeholders, which prompt them to cooperate with your company in a much more unconditional way, but also you bring about better economic results. You bring about better profits, higher sales, more customer loyalty, and so on. Why? Because in practice, many business people miss this point. Very simple point, this is a common sense point, that the most important factor in business is not, as many would think, information or money or technology, but is the human being. When you support the human being, call it customers, employees, suppliers, community members, these human beings are naturally compelled to cooperate with your company. Instead, when you dismiss the human being, when you treat them in a disrespectful way, when you don't support them, when you, for example, try to exploit them, exploiting employees or deceiving customers or polluting the environment, for example, and harming, for example, natural environment of a community, all these stakeholders, employees, customer, community members, are against you. You have them against you. And you cannot succeed without this stakeholder because there is a very simple principle that is the principle of interdependence. You need customers to succeed. You need employees to succeed. You need suppliers to succeed. And you need the community members to support your company. Wouldn't it be nice to have all these stakeholders by your side, on your side, cooperating with your company? You cannot force them to cooperate with your company, but if you build a strong, long-lasting relationship where the needs of each party are fully satisfied, these stakeholders are more prone to cooperate unconditionally. And probably in many cases, they try to support this company even in challenging circumstances. For example, employees might work extra hours without any compensation. Customers might leave positive reviews and might recommend your company to other customers without you paying this customer. Why? Because they feel that their needs are fulfilled. They feel that their needs are met, and also they feel that they're not in a relationship where the company wins at the expense of them. So this is the basic aspect, but it's quite important because in business, most people don't talk about this. What they talk about, what can be measured, what can be counted, and they talk only about business topics. But we have to understand that in business, you don't have business people. You have human beings. Before being business people, before being employees, before being suppliers, before being managers, they are human beings with some needs that obviously require to be satisfied. Emotional needs, for example, they need to be recognized, appreciated. Mental needs, they need to be stimulated on a regular basis. Social needs, they need to feel connected in a meaningful way, and so on. So this means that companies tend to focus only on the concrete, what can be measured, the economic aspect, and they forget, they dismiss the human aspect. And we see companies that take this to the extreme. They take to the extreme way because they try to get profit by all means, exploiting employees, polluting the environment, deceiving stakeholders. And these companies have very bad reputation. You see in many sensationalistic media with bad reputation, bad brand image, and then this backfire the company because customers will buy less from these companies. The community will not support these companies and will try to boycott these companies. Business partners might leave these companies, and all the media will be obviously indulging in this negative behavior and publicizing this all over the world.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Bruno. And so I'm going to attempt to unpack some stuff there. I don't think it's such a simplistic view as, if you treat everyone right, then, happy flower, everybody, all companies, profits go up. I'm not sure that there is a direct correlation. I mean, I've run my own business for the last 20 years. So, I have staff, and I believe in creating an environment where people want to learn, people want to grow, people are respected. But I've also had experience where I've treated people fairly, and they've treated me completely unfairly, right? They've taken things into their, I don't know, maybe they've made decisions on their own that are contrary to the company, contrary to the interests of the company, because they put their interests first. And ultimately, I understand that. So how do you combat that when it's a wonderful view to have of business, you treat your employees well, they treat you well, and you have a great environment. But the reality is that, as you said, we are humans. We're not resources. We are humans, and each human carries with them their own personal shed of emotions and shared experiences and ideas of how they and prejudices. So how would you deal with that in the workplace?
I will deal with some research. First, I will mention some research, and then we give some practical examples. Yeah. There is a very interesting research study that observed that psychologically safe workplaces, what are psychologically safe workplaces? Are places where people are supported. They are treated kindly in a respectful way, but also they are allowed to give their views. So this means these are inclusive environments. They are diverse environments, and people are not ashamed. They are not threatened by others. They are not bullied. They are not harassed. They are safe workplaces where people can express themselves fully. According to this research study that was very famous, this research study observed that in psychologically safe workplaces, this was taken from different companies, and these workplaces tend to bring about higher employee satisfaction. People that are treated fairly, respectfully, kindly, are more prone to react in a positive way because there is a social principle that is the law of reciprocity. When people are treated in a kind way, they are more prone to respond in a kind way. They're not sure to be responding in that way, but they're more prone to be responding. So this is how we interact socially. But people are treated in an unkind way, they're likely to respond in a negative way. So in these psychologically safe workplaces, according to the research, there is higher employee satisfaction, and there is also higher customer satisfaction. And we can say, how can this relate to higher employee satisfaction? And this makes a lot of sense, because when employees are satisfied, they feel supported, they feel respected, they feel recognized, and they feel valued by the company, they tend to be more effective with customer service. They tend to treat customer in a much more cheerful way, supporting them, bringing about meaningful advice for them. Instead, when employees feel disrespected, how they can treat customer well. So this means that happy employees make happy customers. So to simplify the research study. But also in these workplaces, according to research, tend to have lower stress level. And we know that the stress is very bad in excess. Why? Because bring about a freeze, fight, flight mode, and people tend to be less productive, less creative, more fearful, and they cannot reason well. Their discerning skills are impaired temporarily. So less stress level, lower medical bills for these people that they get burnout or stress, but also lower turnover. So this means that people want to remain in this company. They want to keep on working. Why? Because they feel at ease. They feel supported. They feel that they're treated in a compassionate way. And also, this brings about also a positive impact on the bottom line. This means profits. So this means that, why? Because when employees are feeling at ease, more satisfied, they tend to be more productive. They are more prone to go the extra mile. They serve customer better, and these customers are more prone to leave positive reviews. And this positive review attract more customers. So this is a positive cycle. But also there is a very important point that is, according to research too, that is the aspect of emotional contagion. When people feel negative emotions and interact with others, they are prone to infect others with this negative emotion. Supposing that you feel angry with an employee, you are the manager, and you try to communicate with this employee and start shouting at this employee and start disrespecting this employee. Well, this negative emotion, anger, as a manager, you are infecting this employee with anger, and this employee is less likely to respond in a positive way. Is less likely to be productive. If you threaten this employee, will not be productive at all. Is more likely to shut down. Is more likely to not to rock the boat and look for other job opportunity. So, on the contrary, when the manager is cheerful, is kind, treat people in a very respectful way, supportive way, compassionate way. When someone has a problem, they can lend an ear to listen to them, allow them to work flexible times, and so on. These employees are more prone to reciprocate. Why? Because they feel indebted. They have been treated in a kind way, and then feel naturally indebted to respond in a kind way and give their best whenever possible. So people tend to be driven by this love reciprocity. When they're treated well, and you see with customers, when customers are very satisfied with the company, they come back. If they are not satisfied, they will look for another company. You see in many cases with very obvious examples. But this applies to employees, this applies to community members, this applies to suppliers, to any stakeholder. Because at the end, regardless of the role that you see in business, manager or subordinate or customer service officer, what we have? We have a commonality. All these roles have a commonality that is the common humanity. We are all human beings with similar needs. We have aspiration, we have positive expectation, we have fears, we have family problems, and we have some health issues, we have negative past experiences, positive past experiences. And most people try to connect through the roles. But roles are important for authority, but they forget the commonality. We're all human beings. And when we face difficulty, we need to be helped by others, or we require, in many cases, for some help from others. This is about being compassionate, because compassion, well, as I mentioned in my book, is quite simple to define. Understanding how people think, understanding how other people feel, and try to support them whenever possible. Because when we're in difficulties, we would like to be supported by others, okay? So, and this applies, and there is a lot of research on this, but when companies are human-oriented, they tend to have much more long-term profits. They tend to have also much better reputation, better brand image. Why? Because the company is not only care for customers, it's care for the community, donating resources, it's caring for the environment, for example, using green energies and so on. And it's also caring for the supplier, building long-lasting relationship with the supplier. The company with better brand image and better reputation tend to attract high-quality investors, more talented employees, and tend to bring about higher quality customer, what we call conscious customer. So this means that this generates a positive cycle. Instead, when companies are only focused on profit, and focus on profit means cutting off employee like they were faulty pieces of the machinery when they don't work well, or, for example, polluting the environment using energy that are not environmentally friendly, or deceiving suppliers, or, well, affecting the community in a negative way, this company has a negative reputation. This will be all over the media, and this company is less prone to attract talented employees, high-quality investors, and high-quality business partners.
Yeah, wow. I still feel, I mean, I love what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing in any way.
Okay.
I'm I know I have listeners who ask me these type of questions, and
Yes.
so I want to be a voice for some of the listeners who come from, the other end. I have customers. I'm a leadership coach as well. So I have companies that they put profit in the center.
Okay.
And they're unapologetic about putting profit in the center. The whole idea of a business is if it's not profitable, then we don't have a business. So, it would be nice to be able to focus on treating all the employees fairly, but not every employee comes to work with that idea as well. They come, there are some employees that come to the work and see the employees, the employers as the enemy, and they bring that into the workplace. And so I've had listeners who will say to me that trust has nothing to do with it, right? If you are offering a good salary, you're offering good working conditions, or you're offering a good product and a good service, then clients will buy from you. It means nothing whether they trust you or not. It's just the fact that if your service is a good service, and you dedicate yourself to making sure it's the best service, then you naturally have customers. I'm not saying I agree with this 100%. I don't think it's black or white, but I'd really like to invite you to comment on that.
Very good, very good. Let's talk about customer. Customers are very picky. Customer now they have hundreds of choices. Even if you have the good service, you won't be necessarily preferred by customers. So you have to stand out and go beyond what most companies do, that is offering good service, good product. This is not enough. Companies that really stand out delight customer. What do we mean by delight customer? Delight is going beyond customer satisfaction. What is customer satisfaction? For example, I buy a computer, they deliver a nice computer, high quality, by post, on time. This is okay. This is what we expect. We expect this.
Yeah,
so we are paying for this. But delighting is going beyond this. If, for example, I am the company delivering this computer to this customer, what I will do is I will offer this customer a free training course on how to use a computer, how to use artificial intelligence, and a pack that is free to be used, for example, for 2 years without any cost. Why? You can say, oh, but you are being generous. This represents a cost. Because you are going beyond what other companies do. You are trying to differentiate yourself. You are being generous. And by being generous, you are investing in this customer. And this customer is more prone to feel indebted. You exceeded their needs and they feel indebted. They are more prone to leave very positive reviews. They are more prone to leave a recommendation on your product to other customers. But also, remember, customers are not only rational, they are emotional too. So this means that you don't have to offer only a good product or service. This is not enough. You have to make this customer feel, and I have a full chapter in my book about compassionate customer relationships, if you make this customer feel positive emotion before they buy the product, during the buying process, and afterwards. And I can give you an example. Many customers, when they are a bit indecisive, they have many options. So what they will need, when they're making the decision if they will buy your product or the competitor product, they need emotional support. They might feel a bit indecisive, they might feel a bit insecure. So the vendor is talking to this customer, will probably try to support the sale with some argument, but also offering this customer the possibility of being supported if they regret. For example, they might say, you know what, if you're not sure, we can give you a period of time where you can use this product without any string attached. You can return and we can refund you, no problem. So this means that if the customer, for example, is affected what we call cognitive dissonance, they feel regretful when they bought this product, they know that they will be emotionally supported by this company. They won't feel any regret. Why? Because the company will support. But after the selling process, the customer need to be supported too. Why? How many companies I see here, I'm based in the UK, how many companies I have seen here in the UK that when you call the customer service office, they put you on hold with the music. And what happened? 20 minutes and the clock is ticking and customer feel dismissed. Or they can say, no, we have to talk to the manager, we cannot solve the problem now, or send an email. Customer need to have their problem solved. This means they need to be emotionally supported. They do not need to experience any negative emotion whenever possible. And if the company made a mistake, have to resolve this mistake as soon as possible without charging the customer for this. What we call, yes, this is quite important.
This sounds to me, I mean, this is simple business sense, right? If you are a customer-centric business, then obviously your job as a company is to deliver over and above the expectations of your customer. And the only way to know what the expectations of your customer are is to engage with your customer. So you have to be able to build that relationship with your customer to understand the challenges that they're facing so you can over-deliver. And I get that. One of the comments I get a lot is, I'll paint a scenario for you. Let's flip it the other way around when we talk about compassion. So I run a small company. I run a company that we organize conferences around the world. And we are often negotiating with vendors who are large chains of hotels, maybe large convention centers. And so we're often negotiating larger deals, but with a small player, and they are a huge convention center in the middle of maybe it could be the Excel Center in London, something like that.
Okay.
And so when it comes to negotiating with them, they know I need their services. They know this. So they may say to me, right, okay, our payment terms are we pay 60 days after the event has been confirmed. Now, that's not being compassionate to me. I'm a small business. So as a small business, I need to I need that money up front. I need to be able to pay my vendors. And so if I'm going to be paid by my by my clients, if I'm going to be paid 60 days afterwards, but I need to be able to pay beforehand, then I'm the one who's being penalized. But they don't care, because all they care about is, look, it's 60 days or find somebody else. And so I often think sometimes when it comes to negotiating in this way, I often think, well, how do I build compassion into a relationship like that when they don't really care? They're a big vendor, they're a big company. I'm just another number to them. And if it's not me, it's somebody else.
Very interesting question. Well, negotiation, there is a full appendix of compassionate negotiation. In my view, the only deals that matter are the win-win deals. When one party gets all the gains at the expense of the other, as it looked like in this case that you mentioned, you shouldn't be going ahead, because you will regret. And this relationship will not last. It's not even a relationship, it's a transaction. We have to differentiate between transaction, one-off interaction, and a relationship. In business, you want to build long-lasting relationship. Company like Honda, Toyota, the big car manufacturer, they build for decades relationship with their supplier. And imagine that they have supplier of parts for these cars all over the world. Why? Because they need stability, they need reliability, they need trust, mutual trust with the supplier. In this case, I feel that this partner was not the ideal partner for you, but there are other partners in the marketplace. Why? Because when a company, especially some big companies, are taking advantage over small companies, well, this is an unfair situation. An unfair situation doesn't build meaningful communication, doesn't build support, doesn't build mutual transparency, and doesn't build also long-lasting relationship. I feel that, and being compassionate doesn't mean taking any deal. I always say in my talks and also training to companies that in any decision in business, you have to think with the mindset of win-win-win. If a decision is to be made and one of the parties is not winning because the other party is winning at the expense of this party, the decision will not be made, shouldn't be made. Why? Because this is condemned to fail. This is not likely to be converted into long-lasting relationship because will build resentment, will build regret because you are taking advantage. In your case, I feel that you have been taken advantage or you were to be taken advantage by this company. You shouldn't go ahead, but there are many other companies that are more prone to negotiate this in a much more reasonable way. Because at the end, what is important in negotiation? There are two things that are important in negotiation. First off is what we call the substantive condition. What are the substantive conditions? The price, the time of delivery, and so on. These are very important. But the other important aspect of negotiation that need to be taken into consideration are the human aspect. Do we build a long-lasting relationship with this supplier or customer? Do we trust each other? Do we have a win-win deal? Do we respect each other? Do we meet each other's needs? Because at the end, negotiation is arriving to an agreement or a deal where the needs of both parties are met, fully met. And in some cases, there could be some compromise. But the needs of both parties need to be met. If not, this relationship or transaction will break up. Like any relationship, if the needs of one party is not met, this relationship, we call commercial relationship or love relationship, family relationship, will break up. So breakups in business and in life are because of the needs of one party not being fully met. The party feel dismissed, they feel this. I feel that in your case you feel a bit disrespected or taken advantage. This is not good. But there are many other options in the market where companies are more prone to support this type of activities. In some cases, they might even look for some sponsoring to support this type of event, looking for other options because being big doesn't mean that they're a monopoly. There are always, in any sector, there are different participants that you can look into as options. So I shouldn't take this deal if I was in your situation.
Well, in the end, actually, I did take the deal,
Okay.
but I renegotiated the terms.
They were able to renegotiate. Good.
Yeah. But I mean, as I said, I'm simply poking the bear here because we're on the same side. I teach emotionally intelligent negotiation, so it's all around this. But I also am aware that there are. The new paradigm, you talk about it, I've heard about you talk about it before, about the new paradigm of the way in which we bring compassion, empathy into the workplace. That's a new paradigm. However, we're still living with the frameworks of the old paradigm. And I think there's a word I use, which is it's ultimate bravery, or two words actually, ultimate bravery, that we have to use because we have to be able to be brave enough to adopt some of the tenets of the new paradigm while still living in the frameworks of the old paradigm.
Yes.
And so when you, this idea of talking about empathy, talking about compassion, I remember when I first started talking about it, people would laugh me out of the office and think, well, what role does that actually have in the workplace? But then when you do the studies and you do the research and you realize, the quiet quitting that happened during COVID, and you realize the reason people were quitting was because they just weren't happy. And I remember doing a podcast with somebody, and she said to me, when quiet quitting began, I looked around my team and I said, for the first time in 25 years, I am not the only one who feels this way. And suddenly a voice was given to all of these emotions that had been suppressed. So I definitely agree. And I think that we need to continue to push this. So when I ask you now about the idea of you call it the art of compassionate business. My question is, why do you call it an art and not a science? And what does a compassionate business look like?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the art, it was a title that I like. Art also because even there are principles that are universal. You can put your own touch, your own view on this, and also your own spin on this. But compassionate business implies that is business that include people, include the human side of people. And I give you an example of why this doesn't appear so much in practice in many companies. In practice, you don't see so much compassionate business. This means that you see only business that is profit-oriented, not human-oriented. Can be both. Human-oriented and profit-oriented is the best way, but you don't see any human-oriented approach on business. And you see, because in practice, companies are not fostering awareness in the workplace. How can this happen? In practice, it happens because you see that people are continually busy. People are multiple deadlines. There are multiple projects simultaneously, multitasking. They don't have time in some cases, in some companies, don't have time to have a little lunch at midday. Yeah. They don't have to communicate on a human level. They're only talking about business topic, and some people might have health problem, family problem. They're not even caring about what is going on outside business. Some companies don't allow people to talk about their emotions. And when you don't talk about your emotions, you suppress or repress, and this affects your performance, you affect your productivity, affect the way that you think creatively and how you analyze things critically. So this means that companies are constantly focused on business topics, what is important, but to the extreme, and they don't allow anything outside business to enter the workplace or enter the communication, the current communication. This is quite sad because in practice there are many studies that when people are acting in a much more compassionate way, but understanding how people think, how people feel, and support them whenever possible, the employee feel much more at ease. They feel more relaxed, less stressed, more soothed. When they have problems, they don't feel on their own. They feel supported. For example, they have, someone that died, a relative that died. Well, and the manager say, you know what, take some days off. It's okay. If you need something, give me a call. We will be in touch. This is a compassionate manager. The compassionate manager doesn't say, no, you have to come to work because of your work contract. This is the opposite, non-compassion. Well, when employees are treated in a compassionate way, according to research study, these employees feel better, more at ease, they feel with more hope, more willingness to support this company, but also they feel that the work environment is inviting, welcoming. They feel that they can connect to colleagues in a much more meaningful way. And they feel that the whole company image is enhanced. And this brings about more productivity, more commitment, more employee loyalty, more camaraderie, and more trust in the workplace. That we didn't talk so much about trust.
Yeah.
So on the contrary, so this means that companies should understand that the human side is an important component. There are three components in business that are important. Companies focus only on one. They focus on the economic aspect of business. But then you have the social aspect of business. The human aspect of business means treating people in a caring way, respectful way, being generous with them, being grateful, supporting them, caring for them. And the environmental aspect, living a better planet, trying not to pollute the environment, trying to bring about products that are environmentally friendly, using organic products, using fair trade agreements, and so on. So these three aspects are important, and companies that have the best brand image, that have the best reputation, tend to fill all these three boxes. In most cases,
what are some examples of these type of companies? Because one thing is the academic research, and I don't want to get bogged down in the academia. If we take that into the real world, I saw you mentioned in the past, you mentioned UPS in one of your videos, and you mentioned Lush. I don't know much about their the internal workings. Could you maybe share some practical examples?
UPS, for example, they care for the environment. They try, in many cases, to slow down the speed of their planes to reduce carbon dioxide emission. But also they pay part-time employees. They pay for their training. Why? They don't need the training for their job but they want employees to feel fulfilled from the intellectual perspective, from the mental perspective. They want this employee to grow professionally and mentally. So they pay for these employees, and they have also a very inclusive workplace. In the case of Lush, Lush is a very interesting example, and I give some little details in my book. There are hundreds of examples in the book, but Lush, for example, they have natural products. I give you an example that describes how Lush acts. Lush was getting some, what the little ingredient that is used for the product, cosmetic product, is called mica, and this were getting from suppliers from India. And in many cases, suppliers from India, in many cases, there have been said by media that they were incurring in what we call child exploitation. So this means that were children working in this type of activities. The supplier that was supplying Lush with this type of ingredient was monitored by the company and was not incurring this type of, obviously, unethical practices. This supplier was taken over by another company that could not be controlled by Lush. So what Lush did, they said, no, we have to be honoring our principles, transparency, honesty, and so on. They eliminated this ingredient completely. Natural mica was eliminated and was produced in an artificial way, man-made. That also was not a polluting way to produce mica. So this means that they replaced the full ingredient because there were some doubts if the new buyer, the buyer of this supplier, was respecting not using child labor, and they replaced the full ingredient. Why? Because they wanted to be honoring their values. Transparency, try to avoid any harm to the environment or to any other stakeholder, and so on. So they show you that company go beyond. In the case, for example, of the Body Shop that is also another cosmetic company, what they did, there was palm oil supplier that was trying to displace people that were in an area that was to set up a plantation. When this company, the Body Shop, took notice of this, they cut off any business deals with this. This was a very big supplier of palm oil that they use a lot for their cosmetic product. They cut off. Why? Because they couldn't tolerate that this company was merciless with the people, the native people in that environment, and they were not caring for their displacement. So this means that there are companies that are taking care not only of customers, but also employees, but also the community. So, and give an example, another company that I mentioned in the book, there are hundreds of companies, Patagonia. Patagonia is a company that developed attire products. This company has a nursery on site when employees go to work. They can leave their children, paid by the company, and they can see their children at midday. They can play with their children when they're having a break. And you can say, why this company will incur in this cost? Because it's not obligated by law. But they know that when employees are happier because someone is taking care for their children, these employees are more prone to be productive, providing with meaningful ideas and so on, as compared with the employees that have to pay for their own nursery. So this means that this company is investing in their employees. They're not incurring any cost. Why? Because they're investing in employees' well-being. These are two examples, but I have many other examples.
I mean, I think as I'm hearing you talk, it begins by leadership. It begins at leadership level, and you know, I always have this thought in mind that you cannot be a compassionate leader, or you cannot lead a compassionate company if you're not a compassionate leader yourself, right? So you can't scale a company if you don't scale yourself. And good human beings make good leaders. And so if we rewind it back and start with the individual, what I've written down here is, instead of maybe trying to build these compassionate companies, which might seem to some people like you're trying to fight against a typhoon that's coming right at you, would it make more sense for companies to start to look for acts of compassion that they can build into their company? So when you mention this as a nursery, that's an act of compassion, right?
Yes.
And then the momentum starts to build, and then before you know it, 20 years later, you look back and you realize you're a compassionate business.
Yes, small acts of kindness make a lot of difference. They create ripple effects. There is another example of a consultancy company, one of the big four, that provide employees with counseling service when they feel at unease, or they feel depressed, or they feel have some mental problems. This company will support this employee. It's not obligated by law. A small act of compassion, a small act of kindness make a lot of difference and bring about a positive cycle of reciprocity. Why? Because supposing that you are the leader and you are compassionate, you are the CEO or the general manager and you are compassionate, you are setting a role to be emulated, a positive role to be emulated. You are acting in an ethical way, in a supportive way, and employees are likely to follow the leader how they act. Either the leader acting in a positive or a negative way. If the leader acts in a compassionate way, this leader is more likely to be copied, to be emulated, and people are more likely to bring about a much more compassionate workplace. But also we saw the law of reciprocity. When you treat people in a compassionate way, in a kind way, you are more prone to feel that this person will respond to you or to others in a compassionate way, because people feel indebted. As we mentioned, we feel indebted when we feel that we have been supported, that people were generous and grateful to us. Also, this applies to generosity and gratefulness. When people are generous and grateful to you, you're more prone to become grateful to the person that was grateful to you, or generous to the person that was generous to you, or to others. So this means that this is spread in a positive way. The opposite happens when you spread fear. Let's talk about fear briefly. Most of the companies here in the UK and Europe and worldwide are full of fear. Fear employees. I talked to a colleague of mine that is advising a company, a big consultancy company, that employees are fearful every week if they will be fired or not. They go look at their boss body language to see will we be fired or not. They cannot sleep well during the weekend because they are fearful, and this creates a lot of negative hormones, cortisol, and others that put its employee in a freeze fight flight mode. They cannot be productive. They are all continually stressed out. They have burnout. So the idea is that fear is spread out also in a very evident way, and kindness is spread out in a very evident way too. So this means that fear tends to bring about lower productivity, lower creativity, lower critical analysis, and companies still believe that threatening employees or nagging at them or micromanaging. I see companies that treat employees like they were naughty children, and they do not delegate. They don't trust even to open an envelope, and this is unacceptable. And employees are not only motivated by a salary, by a pay slip. I want everyone to know this. Employees, when they meet the basic needs, they also need to meet their emotional needs. They need to feel valued. They need to feel that they're contributing to something meaningful. They need to feel that they're connecting to something, a nice environment, for example, colleagues, social environment where they connect to others, but also employees, if they find a better opportunity where they have the same salary or even lower, but they are supported emotionally, that they were not supported in the previous company, they're more likely to switch from the previous company to the new company because some of their needs are not met. So employees, like any other stakeholder, have economic needs, emotional needs, mental needs, and social needs. So most companies focus only on the economic need. Let's pay a good salary or basic salary according to law, and that's it. Emotional needs are generally dismissed. Employees are not recognized. They are taken for granted. When they contribute a lot, this is their duty. This is their obligation according to contract. No, they're giving their best. In some cases, working extra hours. Why don't you write down a thank you note? Or why don't you organize an event, a dinner, for them to chill out and congratulate for their contribution? So basic things, and some companies do not stimulate employees mentally. So I see a company, for example, here in London, a factory, that the employees is hammering a nail 8 hours a day. This employee is bored. They want to. When I saw this employee, the face of this employee was, I want to leave this company because I feel bored. You have to stimulate employees with new training, workshops, new projects, in some cases job rotation, allowing them to work in different areas of the company, because employees need to look for novelty. It's a natural need for novelty. They want stability, but also they want novelty. They want to be stimulated mentally. And socially, companies, many cases, they have employees that are working in a very isolated way. And this is not good either, because social projects allow you to interact with others, build rapport, make friends in many cases. And some companies go even beyond. They organize social events, for example, once a week or once a month, for employees to chill out. They don't talk about business topic, but they go have dinner, managers, subordinate, everyone one-to-one at the same level. They can connect to others in a much more emotional and mental way, and they connect to others in a much more personal way, not in a business way.
Bruno, we've gone over time, and I must let the listeners know that today is actually the 21st of April, and it's almost 10 p.m. here in Barcelona and 9 p.m. in the UK, and that shows how passionate Bruno is about his subject. It's a bank holiday today as well, and he's taken time out of his busy day, relaxing bank holiday, to share something he's really passionate about. And I always love engaging with people in this space who are really passionate, because I think we're in a liminal space right now. We're in that space where people are starting to ask questions and looking for options, and instinctively, intuitively, we know that there's better out there, that we can't just be chasing Q1 profits, Q2 profits. Instinctively, we know that. And the more people share the message that you have, I think we'll be able to create a new landscape, So I'm indebted to you for sharing your knowledge with us. I really appreciate that. I'd like to just finish by asking you, what is it you're working on at the moment, Bruno? That's really exciting. And how can listeners find you if they want to contact you direct?
They can find me first. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can put my name, but also my website is one of my websites, www.brunocignacco.com. Now, currently, I'm finishing my next book, but the only thing that I can say is about change. It's not about compassion, but will be change with a human orientation. Only this, I'm not allowed to say anything else because of confidentiality agreements, but I feel that it's a very interesting, and probably the book will be finished by the end of the year and will be published next year. So, yes, and I'm continually training companies and also providing advice, giving some talks worldwide too on this topic. I always feel delighted to give training and talks on this, because I feel that there are many companies that at the beginning are a bit resistant to this type of ideas. They're very conservative, very traditional. But then when you start relating these ideas to science, so science-based facts, and studies, and giving example of companies that are very successful, which I include hundreds in my new edition of the book, The Art of Compassionate Business. Companies are much more open-minded, especially when these companies are full of people from the newest generation. In many cases, what I observe that the older generations are more prone to offer more resistance. But that doesn't mean that they're not accepting this idea. Instead, the newer generation are much more welcoming of this idea, Generation Z or Millennium and so on. But I feel delighted every time that people can embrace these values and principles, because we will leave not only a better business environment, but a better world for our great grandchildren.
Wonderful. Bruno Cignacco, thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.